I'm Madison, 29, and my relationship with my parents has always been complicated. My mother, Barbara, never believed in me, while my father, Robert, quietly supported my dreams. When Dad's 60th birthday approached, I suggested taking them to dinner. Mom laughed, saying I couldn't afford it, not knowing she'd chosen my restaurant for the celebration. The look on her face when the staff greeted me as chef and owner was priceless. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I went from being the family disappointment to successful restaurant owner right under my mother's nose. Growing up in our suburban home, family dynamics were always tense. My mother, Barbara, was perpetually critical, especially of me. Nothing I did was ever good enough. She'd nitpick everything from my grades to my appearance, while constantly singing the praises of my cousin Amanda. "Why can't you be more like Amanda?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Amanda got straight A's. Amanda was class president. Amanda got into an Ivy League school. I was constantly living in the shadow of her accomplishments, at least in my mother's eyes. My father, Robert, was different. He was kind and supportive, but in a quiet way that never directly challenged my mother. When Barbara would launch into one of her tirades about my inadequacies, Dad would slip in gentle encouragements afterward. "I thought your science project was creative, Madison." He'd whisper when Mom was out of earshot after she'd criticized my work, or he'd leave notes in my lunchbox with simple messages like "proud of you" on days I had tests or presentations. The real magic in my childhood happened at my grandmother's house. Grandma Rose was my father's mother, and she lived just a few blocks away from us until I was 16. Every Saturday, I'd escape to her kitchen while my mother was at her weekly tennis game. Grandma taught me how to cook, starting with simple cookies and eventually moving to complex sauces and perfect pastries. "You have a gift, Madison," she'd say, watching me instinctively adjust seasonings or know exactly when something was done. "Your hands know what to do before your head does." That's the mark of a true chef. Those Saturday cooking sessions were my sanctuary, but I kept my growing passion for cooking largely secret at home. My mother had definite ideas about suitable careers, and being a chef wasn't on the list. She envisioned me as a lawyer or business executive, something prestigious she could brag about to her friends. Our family dinners were particularly stressful. Barbara insisted on formal sit-down meals most nights, less for family bonding and more as another opportunity to critique. She'd comment on everything from my table manners to my day's activities, always finding something lacking. If I was quiet, I was sullen. If I spoke up, I was attention-seeking. "Madison, stop slouching." "Madison, your grades in math are slipping." "Madison." Amanda was just selected for a summer internship at her father's law firm. Dad would try to redirect these conversations. "Barbara, did you hear Madison won the creative writing contest?" Or "Madison helped me fix the garage door today. She's quite handy." His attempts usually fell flat against my mother's determination to find fault. When I turned 17 and announced I wanted to go to culinary school instead of pursuing pre-law, as my mother had planned, the real battle began. As chef, Barbara had scoffed, her face contorting as if I'd suggested becoming a professional dumpster diver. "That's not a real career. It's hot, thankless work with terrible hours and no security. You'll be broke your entire life." I think Madison should follow her passion. My father had suggested carefully. "Passion doesn't pay bills, Robert." My mother snapped. "Look at your brother James. He followed his passion for music and now he lives in a one-bedroom apartment at 53. Despite her opposition, I applied to culinary school in secret with my father's quiet assistance. When the acceptance letter came, along with a small scholarship, I finally stood my ground. I'm going, I told her. This is what I want. Fine, Barbara said coldly. But don't come crying to me when you fail. And don't expect us to bail you out when you can't pay your rent because you chose to be a glorified cook. My father hugged me that night. Your grandmother would be so proud, he whispered. Grandma Rose had passed away the year before, and I felt her absence keenly in that moment. The tension between my mother and me only grew over the years that followed. I visited home less frequently, and when I did, Barbara would make pointed comments about my little cooking hobby and ask when I was going to get a real job. She never missed an opportunity to mention Amanda's law school graduation, or her job at a prestigious firm, or her engagement to a surgeon. 5 years ago, everything shifted when my father had a heart attack. It wasn't severe enough to cause permanent damage, but it was a wake-up call for all of us. I rushed home to find my mother uncharacteristically vulnerable, scared of losing her husband of 30 years, sitting in that hospital waiting room, watching my strong, stoic mother crumble slightly under the weight of fear. I saw her differently. For the first time, she wasn't just my critic. She was a woman who had built her entire life around certain expectations and structures. My rejection of her plans for me wasn't just disappointing to her, it threatened her whole worldview. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it better. When Dad recovered, I made a promise to myself. I would make him proud. I would show him man, yes. My mother to that following my passion wasn't a mistake. I wouldn't just survive as a chef. I would thrive. And someday, I would see the look on my mother's face when she realized just how wrong she'd been about me. Little did I know how dramatically that promise would be fulfilled. After culinary school, I dove into the restaurant world, working every position I could to learn the business from the ground up. I started as a dishwasher, then prep cook, line cook, and eventually sous chef at a respected bistro downtown. The hours were brutal 14-hour days. No weekends, holidays spent feeding others while my own family gathered without me. My mother's predictions about the financial struggles seemed to be coming true at first. I shared a tiny apartment with 2 other cooks, drove a car that broke down monthly, and sometimes ate nothing but staff meal for days because my paycheck had to go entirely to rent and student loans. During this time, I called home weekly to check on Dad's health. My mother would inevitably get on the phone to ask if I was still playing around in kitchens and remind me that Amanda had just made junior partner or bought a condo. I would grit my teeth and change the subject. Everything changed when I met Chef Jean Roux. He was a legendary French chef who had earned Michelin stars in Paris before moving to America to open his own restaurant. I was working a catering gig on my day off when he tasted my mushroom canape and stopped mid-chew. Who made this? He demanded from the catering manager. I stepped forward nervously. Sure, I had done something wrong. The balance of flavors is perfect, he said, surprising me. The earthiness of the mushrooms, the brightness of the acid, the hint of thyme, simple but sophisticated. What is your name? Madison Taylor, I replied. Madison Taylor, he repeated, as if memorizing it. You are wasted here. Come see me tomorrow at Maison. I couldn't sleep that night. Maison was one of the most acclaimed restaurants in the city, and Chef Jean was notoriously difficult to work for, but also brilliant. The next day, Chef Jean offered me a job as his saucier. The pay was barely more than I was making, but the opportunity to learn from him was priceless. I accepted immediately. For 2 years, I absorbed everything I could from Chef Jean. He was demanding, but fair, pushing me to perfect every technique, to understand the science behind cooking, to develop my palate until I could identify every ingredient in a complex dish with my eyes closed. You have what cannot be taught, he told me after I created a new sauce for the spring menu that earned rave reviews. I can teach technique. But I cannot teach instinct. You have the soul of a chef. When Chef Jean announced he was returning to France to be closer to his aging parents, he called me into his office. I assumed he wanted to give me a reference for my next job. Instead, he made me an offer that would change my life. There is a restaurant for sale in the downtown district, he said. Le Petit Coin. The location is good, but the concept is stale. It needs new life, new vision. I can't afford to buy a restaurant. I laughed. I have an investor who is interested. He trusts my judgment, and I have told him about you. He will provide the capital if you provide the talent and sweat. 70% ownership for you, 30% for him. No creative control for him. Just a silent partnership. I was stunned. Why me? I'm not ready to be an executive chef, let alone an owner. Because, Chef Jean said simply, when I am back in France telling stories of America, I want to say I discovered Madison Taylor before she became famous. The deal seemed too good to be true. But after lawyers reviewed everything, I signed the papers. At 26, I owned the majority share of a restaurant. I was terrified and exhilarated. I decided not to tell my family yet. My mother would only predict failure, and I couldn't bear her negativity during this critical time. I wanted to prove myself first. Dad would be excited for me, but he never could keep secrets from my mother. So I told them I was still working as a sous chef, but at a new restaurant that kept me too busy to visit often. The first 6 months of owning Le Petit Coin, which I renamed Maeve after my grandmother's middle name, were the hardest of my life. The renovation went over budget and took twice as long as planned. I had to let go most of the original staff who weren't willing to embrace the new concept. Equipment broke down regularly. Some nights I slept on a cot in the office because there wasn't time to go home between closing and reopening. I developed a concept that was uniquely mine, a fusion of the classic French techniques I'd learned from Chef Jean with the comfort food influences from my grandmother's kitchen, all using seasonal, local ingredients. It wasn't quite fine dining and wasn't quite casual. It existed in its own category. Our signature dish became what I call grandmother's chicken. Though it was nothing like traditional grandmother fare, it was a precisely cooked chicken breast with crispy skin, served over a silky celery root puree, with a sauce made from roasted chicken bones and finished with lemon and thyme, the herbs my grandmother grew in her garden. Simple ingredients transformed through technique and love. For the first 3 months after opening, the restaurant was nearly empty most nights. I began to panic about making payroll. The few reviews we received were mixed. Some critics didn't understand what I was trying to do, calling the concept confused and trying too hard. I couldn't afford traditional advertising, so I poured my energy into social media. I posted beautiful photos of our dishes, shared stories about the farmers who supplied our ingredients, and gave followers behind-the-scenes glimpses of restaurant life. I was authentic and personal in a way many restaurant accounts weren't. Slowly, our tables began to fill. A food blogger with a decent following posted about our dessert program. A local farmer mentioned us in a newspaper article about farm-to-table dining. Word began to spread. Then came the review that changed everything. Eliza Hunt, the most respected food critic in the city, visited Maeve unannounced. Her reviews can make or break a restaurant. The night she dined with us, I had no idea she was there until a server whispered her identity to me as she was finishing her main course. I was terrified, but sent out a special dessert. I had been experimenting with a warm apple tart with rosemary ice cream and salted caramel. It was a dish inspired by an apple tree in my grandmother's yard and the rosemary bush that grew beside it. The next Sunday, her review appeared in the newspaper. At Maeve, Chef Madison Taylor is cooking food that tells her story. Each dish carries echoes of classical training, alongside the unmistakable warmth of home cooking, elevated through impeccable technique. The result is deeply personal cuisine that somehow feels universal food that makes you feel both comforted and surprised. The grandmother's chicken alone is worth the visit, but save room for the apple tart with rosemary ice cream, a combination that shouldn't work but absolutely sings on the palate. Miev isn't just a good restaurant, it's an important one. Chef Taylor isn't just cooking food, she's sharing her soul. 5 stars. After that review, everything exploded. Our reservation line was constantly busy. We extended our hours. I hired more staff. We began to turn a profit, then a substantial profit. 6 months later, I was able to buy out my silent partner, owning Miev outright. The success continued to build. I was invited to food festivals, asked to appear on local cooking shows, and approached about writing a cookbook. Miev became one of the hardest reservations to get in the city, often booked 2 months in advance. I was financially secure for the first time in my life, able to pay off my student loans, buy a comfortable condo, and even start investing. Through it all, I kept my success relatively quiet with my family. I told them the restaurant I worked at was doing well and I had been promoted, but I never revealed I was the owner and executive chef of one of the hottest restaurants in the city. Part of me was waiting for the right moment for the big reveal. Part of me was protecting myself from my mother's inevitable attempts to diminish my accomplishments. I had no idea that moment would come on my father's 60th birthday, orchestrated by fate and my mother's own social climbing tendencies. As my father's 60th birthday approached, I found myself thinking more and more about my complicated relationship with my parents, despite the distance I'd maintained, especially from my mother. I wanted to do something special for Dad. He had always been my quiet supporter, and his health scare 5 years ago had reminded me how precious our time together was. I called home on our Sunday afternoon, intentionally timing it when I knew my mother would be at her book club. Dad answered, his voice brightening when he realized it was me. Madison, what a nice surprise. How's the restaurant business treating you? It's good, Dad, really good. Actually, I hesitated, then decided to make my offer. Listen, I was calling about your birthday next month. I'd like to take you and Mom out to dinner somewhere nice. My treat. There was a pause, and I could almost see him smiling on the other end of the line. That would be wonderful, sweetheart. Let me check with your mother about our schedule. Just then, I heard the front door open and my mother's voice calling out, Robert, I'm home early. Margaret was insufferable today, going on about her son's promotion again. It's Madison, my father said, and I heard the phone shifting. Madison, well, this is a surprise, my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar blend of politeness and judgment. How are things at your restaurant? Still cooking? I suppressed. I say, yes, Mom, still cooking. Actually, I was just telling Dad that I'd like to take you both out for a nice dinner for his birthday. There was a pause, and then she laughed that light, dismissive laugh that had always made me feel small. Oh, honey, that's sweet, but you don't need to do that. I know those cooking jobs don't pay much, and the places your father and I enjoy aren't cheap. I can afford it, Mom, I said, trying to keep the edge from my voice. Of course you can, dear, she said in a tone that clearly meant the opposite, but it's already taken care of. I've been planning this for months. I've managed to get us reservations at that new place downtown everyone's raving about. Mev, I think it's called Very Exclusive. You know, normally booked months in advance, but I know someone who knows someone. I nearly dropped the phone. My restaurant. My mother had somehow gotten reservations at my restaurant for my father's birthday dinner, and she was now bragging to me about her connections. Mev, I repeated weakly, yes. Have you heard of it? The chef is supposed to be quite innovative. Some French fusion concept. It's the place to be seen right now. Amanda and her husband went last month and said it was divine. Though overpriced in her opinion, I fought back hysterical laughter. My cousin Amanda thought my restaurant was overpriced. Of course she did. That sounds perfect, I managed to say. Yes, well, we're quite looking forward to it. It's on the 15th at 7. You're welcome to join us. Of course, if you're free, your father would love to have you there. My mind was racing with possibilities. I could tell her right now that Miev was my restaurant. I could watch her backpedal and make excuses over the phone. But something stopped me. There would be something much more satisfying about seeing her face when she realized the truth in person. I wouldn't miss it. I said, I'll see you there. After hanging up, I sat in my office at the restaurant, staring at the reservation book. There it was, Taylor party of 3, 7 p.m., April 15th. My mother had used her married name, which is why the host hadn't made the connection when taking the reservation. The coincidence was almost perfect after years of dismissing my career. My mother had unknowingly chosen my own restaurant to celebrate my father's birthday, thinking it was the impressive, exclusive choice that would reflect well on her. I had 3 weeks to prepare for what would inevitably be a dramatic evening. I called in my restaurant manager, Sophie, and my head server, Daniel. My parents are coming in for dinner on the 15th. I explained. They don't know I am Miev. My mother thinks I'm still working as a line cook somewhere. Sophie's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? How does she not know? You've been in 3 different food magazines this year alone. I shrugged. She doesn't exactly follow the culinary world, and I've been careful to keep a low profile on purpose. But now she's made reservations here, bragging about her connections. And I want to let the situation unfold naturally. Daniel grinned. This sounds like a scene from a movie. I need your help. I continued. When they arrive, treat them well, but don't reveal who I am. I'll join them as if I'm just meeting my parents for dinner. Then, at some point during the meal, I'll give you a signal. We'll do the reveal. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into planning the perfect evening. I designed a special tasting menu featuring elevated versions of my father's favorite foods. For dessert, I created a sophisticated take on the German chocolate cake my grandmother used to make for his birthday, the recipe she had taught me when I was 12. I found myself becoming increasingly anxious as the date approached. Part of me worried that my mother would somehow discover the truth. Beforehand, I checked social media obsessively, half expecting to see a post from one of her friends exposing my secret. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. I kept imagining different scenarios for how the evening might unfold. Would my mother be impressed, embarrassed, angry? Would she try to take credit somehow for my success, claiming she had pushed me to excellence through her criticism? And what about my father? I had no doubt he would be proud, but would he also be hurt that I had kept such a significant achievement from him? The morning of April 15th, I received a call from our reservationist. Ms. Taylor, your mother just called to confirm tonight's reservation and asked if they could be seated at one of the better tables since it's a special occasion. She mentioned knowing a close friend of yours, but didn't give a name. How would you like me to handle these requests going forward? I sighed. Typical. Just tell her we'll take good care of them. Don't mention any connection to me. Throughout the day, I was distracted and on edge. I snapped at a line cook for overcooking a piece of fish, then immediately apologized. I changed my outfit 3 times, wanting to look professional but not too formal when I arrived to meet my parents. By 6 o'clock, I was in my office watching the dining room through the small window in the door. The restaurant was already filling up with the early seating. My staff moved efficiently through their tasks, unaware of the personal drama about to unfold for their boss. At 6:45, My phone buzzed with a text from my father. On our way. Looking forward to seeing you, sweetheart. I texted back a quick reply, then took a deep breath. The stage was set. In 15 minutes, my parents would walk into my restaurant, not knowing it was mine. After years of my mother's doubt and dismissal, she was about to discover just how wrong she had been about me. At 7:05, the host's voice came through on my office phone. Chef, your parents have arrived. From my office window, I watched as my parents were led to their table, one of our best, with a view of both the open kitchen and the garden courtyard. My mother walked with the confident air of someone who believed they belonged in exclusive spaces. She was wearing an expensive-looking navy dress I hadn't seen before, her silver hair perfectly styled, no doubt fresh from the salon. My father followed behind in a suit that seemed slightly too tight around the collar, looking a bit uncomfortable, but happy, I observed as the host pulled up my mother's chair. Welcome to Miev. We're delighted to have you with us this evening, especially for such a special occasion. Yes, it's my husband's 60th birthday, my mother replied, her voice carrying that subtle tone of self-importance I knew so well. We've been looking forward to trying this place for months. I hear it's quite difficult to get a reservation. Indeed, we are frequently booked well in advance. The host responded smoothly. Your server will be Daniel, and he'll be with you momentarily. Please enjoy your evening. As the host walked away, I saw my mother lean into my father. See, Robert, I told you this was the place to be. Amanda said, the chef trained in France, very exclusive. My father nodded and looked around appreciatively at the restaurant I had designed with such care. He warm lighting, the custom wooden tables I'd commissioned from a local craftsman, the herb wall along one side of the dining room that provided both beauty and fresh ingredients. It's very nice, he said sincerely. I like the atmosphere, not stuffy. Daniel approached their table with 2 glasses of champagne on a tray. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor. Welcome to Miev. We understand you're celebrating a birthday tonight, so please enjoy these complimentary glasses of champagne to start your evening. My mother looked pleased. How thoughtful. I do have a good friend who knows the chef here. Perhaps you know her. Judith Blackwood. I had to stifle a laugh. Judith Blackwood was my mother's bridge partner who, to my knowledge, had never set foot in my restaurant and certainly didn't know me. Daniel, well prepared for this moment, smiled politely. I'm afraid I don't know Ms. Blackwood personally, but we're delighted to have you here regardless. Your third guest will be joining you soon. Yes, our daughter, my father said she should be here any minute. Very good. I'll return shortly to tell you about our specials. I waited another 5 minutes, watching as my parents sipped their champagne and my mother surveyed the room, no doubt looking for any celebrities or important people she might recognize. Then I took a deep breath, smoothed down my simple black dress, and stepped out of my office. Walking through the dining room toward their table, my father saw me first. His face lighting up, he stood immediately. Medicine, there you are. My mother turned, her expression shifting from momentary warmth to quick assessment. Madison, you're late. And couldn't you have dressed up a bit more for your father's birthday? This is a very nice restaurant. I leaned down to kiss my father's cheek. Happy birthday, Dad. You look great. Thank you, sweetheart. So do you. I took my seat, ignoring my mother's comment about my attire. I knew perfectly well that my simple dress was appropriate for the restaurant I owned. I was just telling your father how exclusive this place is, my mother continued. Reservations are apparently impossible to get unless you know someone. Luckily, I have connections. Is that so? I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from Daniel, who gave me the slightest wink. Yes, it's quite the hot spot. Amanda and Richard had dinner here last month. She said the food was good, though a bit experimental for her taste. My mother always found a way to bring my cousin into any conversation. My father picked up the menu. Everything sounds delicious. Madison, since you work in restaurants, what would you recommend? Before I could answer, my mother interjected. Madison works at a completely different type of establishment. Robert, I doubt the cuisine is comparable. I bit my tongue. Actually, I'm familiar with the menu here. The grandmother's chicken is their signature dish. It's excellent. My mother opened her menu and her eyes widened slightly. My goodness, these prices. Robert, look at this. $34 for chicken. It better be wrapped in gold leaf. I felt a flash of irritation. The pricing at Maev was actually reasonable compared to other restaurants of our caliber in the city, and every ingredient was carefully sourced. It's a special occasion, my father said gently. Let's enjoy ourselves. Daniel returned to the table. Before I tell you about our specials tonight, I wanted to let you know that the chef has been informed it's a special birthday celebration, and she would like to prepare a special tasting menu for your table. If you're interested, it would include some of our signature dishes as well as a few items created specifically for this evening. The entire meal would be complimentary. My mother's expression shifted instantly from mild shock at the prices to pleased surprise. Complimentary? The entire meal? Yes, Mum. Well, that's very generous, she said, clearly calculating the value of such an offer. I suppose Judith's connection to the chef is even stronger than I realized. My father looked confused, but why would they comp our entire meal? That seems excessive. My mother shot him a look. Robert, don't question it. Clearly they value certain clientele here. She turned back to Daniel. We would be delighted to accept the chef's offer. Please thank her for us. I certainly will, Daniel replied, his professional demeanor never slipping despite the knowing glance he exchanged with me. The chef has also selected wine pairings for each course. If you'd like, absolutely, my mother said before anyone else could respond. As Daniel walked away, my mother looked around the restaurant with new appreciation. This is why networking is so important, Madison. Your father and I are getting a free meal at the most exclusive restaurant in the city because I've maintained the right connections. This is what I've been trying to tell you for years. I took a sip of champagne to hide my expression. It certainly seems to have worked out well for tonight. Yes, well, not all of us can be so fortunate with our career choices, she added, with a pointed look. How is your little restaurant job going? It's going very well, actually, I said truthfully. Still just cooking on the line, she asked. Or have they finally given you some responsibility? My father intervened. Barbara, let's not talk about work tonight. It's supposed to be a celebration. The first course arrived a delicate amuse-bouche of seared scallop with brown butter and preserved lemon that I had created specifically for this dinner. My father took a bite and his eyes widened in pleasure. This is incredible, he said sincerely. My mother tried hers and nodded in agreement. It is quite good. Though the portion is tiny, it's just a starter. Mom, I explained. There will be several more courses. Throughout the next courses, a spring pea soup with mint oil and crispy pancetta, followed by a beet and goat cheese salad with pistachios. My mother continued to make comments about the restaurant, the other patrons, and occasionally circle back to digs about my career. You know, Madison, if you had gone to law school like I suggested, you could be dining at places like this regularly, instead of just when your parents invite you. I remained calm, knowing what was coming. I'm happy with my choices, Mom. Of course you are, dear. But there's being happy and there's being successful. Amanda just made partner. You know, at 31, the youngest female partner in the firm's history. That's great for Amanda, I said neutrally. A waiter approached with our wine for the next course. As he poured, He accidentally spilled a few drops near my place setting. I'm so sorry, chef, he said automatically, then froze, realizing his mistake. My mother looked between us, confused. Chef, why did he call you that? I quickly covered, probably just force of habit since he works in a restaurant. It's like calling all doctors doc, even when they're not your doctor. She seemed to accept this explanation. But I noticed my father looking at me more carefully now, a slight furrow in his brow. He had always been more perceptive than my mother. The next course arrived, my signature grandmother's chicken. Daniel presented it with a flourish. The chef's signature dish, inspired by her grandmother's cooking, but elevated through classical French techniques. My father took a bite and went very still. Then he looked at me with an unreadable expression. This tastes remarkably like your grandmother's chicken, Madison, the one she used to make with thyme from her garden. I held his gaze. Does it? What a coincidence. My mother, oblivious to the undercurrent of recognition passing between my father and me, was busy trying to flag down the sommelier. Excuse me, this wine is excellent. What is it exactly? The sommelier approached our table. It's a small production Burgundy, madam, not generally available in retail stores. The chef selected it specifically for this dish and for the birthday celebration. Well, please tell the chef she has excellent taste in wine, my mother said, clearly enjoying the perceived special treatment. The chef will be pleased to hear that, the sommelier replied with a subtle nod to me. In fact, this particular bottle was from her personal collection. She thought Mr. Taylor might appreciate it, as she understood Burgundy is his favorite region. My father's eyebrows shot up. My mother looked confused. How would the chef know my husband's wine preferences? I believe the chef has excellent sources of information, the sommelier replied smoothly before retreating. My mother turned to me. Did you tell them your father likes Burgundy? When you made the reservation? I didn't make the reservation. Mom, you did. She frowned, then dismissed the puzzle with a wave. Well, I suppose I might have mentioned it, or perhaps Judith told them. My father was still studying me with growing suspicion and what looked like the beginning of pride. I avoided his gaze, not wanting to reveal this surprise too soon. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing up. I'll be right back. Instead of going to the restroom, I slipped into the kitchen to check on the special birthday dessert I had prepared. The pastry chef had executed my recipe perfectly, a modern interpretation of German chocolate cake, my father's favorite, with layers of dark chocolate sponge, coconut cream, and pecan pralini, topped with a single gold leaf decorated chocolate, shaped like the number 60. It's almost time, I told my team. When I give the signal, bring out the dessert with the sparklers and be ready for the big reveal. When I returned to the table, my mother was in the middle of ordering another glass of the Burgundy, emphasizing to Daniel that since the meal was complimentary, she might as well enjoy the free wine and make sure it's the same one as before. She instructed. The special bottle from the chef's collection. Daniel maintained his professional composure. Of course, Mrs. Taylor. Mom, I said as I sat down, feeling embarrassed by her behavior. Maybe don't take advantage of the restaurant's generosity. She gave me a dismissive look. Madison, when opportunities present themselves, you take them. That's how successful people operate. If this restaurant wants to give us the royal treatment, I'm not going to refuse. My father looked uncomfortable. Barbara, I think Madison's right. We shouldn't overdo it. Nonsense, she replied. I'm sure they comp meals for important people all the time. It's part of their marketing budget. Daniel returned with another glass of wine for my mother, who took it with barely a thank you. Then she turned to the couple at the next table, who were clearly celebrating an anniversary. Are you enjoying your evening? She asked them, her voice carrying the artificial warmth she used when networking. We're celebrating my husband's 60th birthday. The chef is preparing a special menu for us. Apparently, she's very exclusive. But I have connections. I wanted to sink through the floor. The couple smiled politely and congratulated my father before turning back to their own conversation. Mom, I whispered urgently, please don't bother other guests. I'm being friendly, Madison. Something you could learn more about. Networking is how I got us this wonderful experience tonight. My father decided to change the subject. So, Madison, tell us more about your current job. You've been quite vague about it lately, yes? My mother interjected, still at that same little bistro. What was it called again? Or have you moved on to another entry-level position somewhere else? I took a deep breath. I'm actually in a management position now. Oh, my mother looks surprised. Well, that's something, I suppose. Though restaurant management isn't exactly a career with a high ceiling. What's the place called? Maybe we've heard of it. Before I could answer, the next course arrived, a palate cleanser of lemon sorbet with a thin sugar toll. As the server placed it in front of me, he said, Chef, is the temperature to your liking? My mother's head snapped up. That's the second time someone has called you chef. What's going on? I told you, Mom, it's just a habit in restaurants. Everyone in the kitchen is called chef. She frowned, clearly not entirely convinced, but let it go as she tried the sorbet. This is excellent, so refreshing. My father was watching me more intently now. Madison, you mentioned you're in management. What exactly do you manage? Various aspects of the restaurant. I said vaguely, like what? The waitstaff, the bar. My mother pressed, among other things. Well, I suppose it's a step up from just cooking, she conceded, though her tone suggested she still found it inadequate. Though nothing like what Amanda has achieved. Of course, did I mention she just closed a 7-figure deal for her firm? They're sending her to London next month to open their new international office. I had heard enough about Amanda to last a lifetime. That's great, Mom. I'm sure Amanda is very happy with her life choices, just as I am with mine, yes, but the difference is that her choices have led to success and financial security. You're still living in that tiny apartment, I assume, still driving that old car. I had actually upgraded to a comfortable condo in a nice neighborhood and a new hybrid car. But I hadn't told my parents. My living situation is comfortable. My mother sighed dramatically. I just worry about your future. Madison, you are almost 30, no partner, no real career advancement, no assets to speak of. What happens when you're 50 and still standing on your feet all day in a hot kitchen for minimum wage plus tips? My father put his hand on hers. Barbara, that's enough. Madison is doing fine. And it's my birthday dinner. Let's keep things positive. She patted his hand. I'm just being realistic, Robert. Someone has to think about these things. The sommelier returned to our table with a bottle of rare dessert wine. Excuse me, but the chef thought Mr. Taylor might enjoy this with his birthday dessert. It's a 1965, so turns from the year of your birth, I believe. My father's eyes widened. That must be incredibly expensive. It is indeed a special bottle, the sommelier confirmed. The chef insists it's a perfect way to celebrate such a milestone birthday. How thoughtful, my mother said, though I could see her trying to work out how the chef could possibly know my father's birth year. Please thank her for us. We're overwhelmed by the generosity. I'll be sure to convey your appreciation, the sommelier replied, opening the bottle with practiced precision as he poured small amounts of the golden liquid into specialized dessert wine glasses. My father leaned toward me. Madison, something strange is going on. How does the chef know my birth year? And why is she being so extraordinarily generous to people she's never met? Before I could respond, Daniel approached our table again. Mr. Taylor, the chef would like to know if you've enjoyed your meal so far. My father nodded, still looking confused. Very much so. Everything has been exceptional. Please give the chef my compliments. Though I'm still not clear on why we're receiving such special treatment, the chef has her reasons. Daniel said with a slight smile. She'll be delighted to hear you've enjoyed the experience. My mother interjected. When you return to the kitchen, please ask the chef if she could recommend a good wine shop where we might find some of these excellent selections, particularly that Burgundy. The chef actually sources many of the wines directly from small producers in France, Daniel explained. But I'm sure she would be happy to provide some recommendations. Well, we'd appreciate it, my mother said. It would be nice to serve something this sophisticated at our next dinner party. Amanda and her husband are real wine connoisseurs. You know, I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. My mother had managed to bring Amanda into the conversation yet. Again, I'm going to check on our dessert, I said, standing up. It should be ready soon. As I headed toward the kitchen, I heard my mother say to my father, Madison is acting very strange tonight. And why does she need to check on our dessert? Sometimes I wonder if she's completely lost touch with how to behave in fine establishments. In the kitchen, I gathered my stuff. It's time for the reveal. My father is starting to suspect something, and my mother is being, well, herself. Let's do this now. I explained the plan to everyone. The entire kitchen staff and several servers would emerge with the birthday dessert, complete with sparklers. Daniel would make the announcement that I was actually the executive chef and owner, and everyone would witness my mother's reaction. Are you sure you want to do it this way? Sophie asked. It's going to be quite public, I'm sure, I said firmly. After years of her dismissing my career and comparing me to my perfect cousin, I want her to have to acknowledge my success in front of others. As the dessert was prepared for presentation, I felt a mix of emotions, nervousness, anticipation, a hint of vindictiveness I wasn't entirely proud of, but mostly a deep desire for recognition from the people who should have believed in me all along. I gave the signal, and the plan was set in motion. I returned to the table just as the lights in the restaurant dimmed slightly. My father looked around in confusion, while my mother seemed pleased. Assuming this was yet another special touch for their VIP treatment. What's happening? My father asked. I think you're about to find out, I replied, unable to keep a small smile from my face. The door to the kitchen swung open, and Daniel emerged leading a procession of staff members. The pastry chef carried the elaborate German chocolate cake creation adorned with sparklers that cast a warm, golden glow throughout the dining room. Behind them came line cooks, servers, the sommelier, and even the dishwashers all moving in a choreographed line toward our table. The other diners turned to watch, some taking photos of the spectacle. As the procession reached our table, the staff spread out in a semicircle, and Daniel stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced in a clear voice that carried throughout the restaurant. Tonight we have the honor of celebrating a very special occasion. Mr. Robert Taylor is celebrating his 60th birthday, and we are especially delighted because he is the father of our very own chef Madison Taylor, the executive chef and owner of Miev. There was a moment of complete silence at our table. My father's mouth fell open in shock, his eyes darting between me and the staff. But it was my mother's face that was truly a study in disbelief. Her expression shifted rapidly from confusion to shock to something unreadable, her perfectly maintained composure cracking for perhaps the first time in my memory. What? She finally managed to say, her voice unusually small. The pastry chef placed the elaborate dessert in front of my father as the staff began singing happy birthday. Many of the other diners joined in, creating a warm chorus throughout the restaurant. My father's eyes welled with tears, but he never took his gaze off me. When the song ended, Daniel continued, Chef Madison opened Miev 3 years ago, transforming it from a struggling bistro into one of the city's most acclaimed dining destinations. Her innovative cuisine has earned her recognition as one of Food and Wine's best new chefs last year, and Maiev was recently awarded its first Michelin star. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the restaurant, with some patrons actually applauding. My mother sat frozen, her wineglass halfway to her lips. Sophie stepped forward. Working with Chef Madison has been the highlight of my career. She creates an environment of creativity and excellence while treating every member of her staff with respect and dignity. One of the line cooks added, "Chef taught me everything I know about proper technique. She's tough but fair, and she's always the first one and the last one out." Daniel concluded, "So tonight, we're not just celebrating Mr. Taylor's birthday, but also honoring the incredible talent and determination of his daughter, who has become one of the most respected chefs in the city." More applause followed as my father stood up and embraced me tightly. "I am so proud of you," he whispered in my ear, his voice thick with emotion. So incredibly proud. When he released me, I saw tears streaming down his face. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked. "I wanted to prove myself first," I said softly. "And honestly, I was tired of being compared to Amanda and found wanting." My father nodded in understanding, then turned to the staff. "Thank you all. This is the most meaningful birthday celebration I could imagine." My mother remained seated, seemingly unable to process what was happening. As the staff dispersed back to their duties, leaving just Daniel to serve the dessert, she finally found her voice. "You own this restaurant?" she asked, her tone incredulous. "This restaurant?" "Maiev, yes, Mom, for 3 years now." "But how? Restaurants cost millions to open." "I had an investor initially, but I've since bought him out. The restaurant is entirely mine now, and the Michelin star." "Is that true?" "Yes. We received it 4 months ago." At that moment, a distinguished-looking man approached our table. I recognized him immediately as James Pearson, the city's most influential food critic whose reviews can make or break a restaurant. "Chef Taylor," he said warmly, "I didn't want to interrupt your family's celebration, but I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed the spring menu. The new halibut dish with the sorrel sauce is inspired." "Thank you, James," I replied. "That means a lot coming from you." He nodded politely to my parents. "You must be very proud of your daughter. She's revolutionized the dining scene in this city. We're all eager to see what she does next." My mother immediately straightened her posture and adopted her networking smile. "Yes, we are extremely proud. Madison has always been so creative. I encouraged her passion for cooking from a young age, you know." I stared at her in disbelief as she attempted to rewrite history on the spot. "Really?" James said, looking between us with interest. "Chef Taylor, you never mentioned your mother was a culinary influence." Before my mother could respond, I said firmly, "My grandmother was my culinary influence. She taught me to cook when I was young." My mother's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Yes, my mother-in-law was quite the home cook, but I was the one who suggested Madison might turn it into a career. I've always believed in supporting my daughter's dreams. I couldn't let this stand." Years of diminishment and criticism suddenly crystallized into a moment of necessary confrontation. "Actually, Mom," I said clearly, "you told me repeatedly that being a chef wasn't a real career. You said I'd be broke my entire life and that I was making a mistake. You compared me to Amanda at every opportunity and found me lacking. You've spent years dismissing my choices and my work." The table fell silent. James Pearson looked uncomfortable and made a graceful exit with a quick, "Lovely to see you all. Enjoy your evening." My mother's face flushed. "Madison, I don't think this is appropriate dinner conversation." "No, I think it's exactly the right conversation," I interrupted, years of suppressed feelings finally finding voice. "You're sitting in my restaurant, eating my food, drinking wine from my cellar. All come because I'm the owner, not because of your supposed connections. And even now, you're trying to take credit for supporting me when you did the exact opposite. My father reached for my hand. Madison, it's okay, Dad, I assured him. I'm not angry anymore. I just need the truth to be acknowledged. My mother looked around, clearly concerned about who might be listening. I only wanted what was best for you, she said defensively. I worried about your future. No. You worried about appearances, I corrected her, about having a daughter with a prestigious-sounding career you could brag about to your friends. But guess what? I have that anyway. I just took a different path to get there. My mother fell silent, looking down at her half-eaten dessert for perhaps the first time in my life. She seemed genuinely at a loss for words. My father stood up, again, addressing the lingering awkwardness with his natural warmth. This is the best birthday gift I could ever receive, he announced, putting his arm around my shoulders. Seeing my daughter succeed on her own terms, creating something so extraordinary. I couldn't be prouder. He turned to the restaurant at large and raised his glass of sauternes to Maeve and to Madison, the most talented and determined person I know. Several nearby diners lifted their glasses in response, creating a spontaneous toast that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. My mother, recovering her composure somewhat, picked up her glass and joined the toast, though her eyes revealed a complex mix of emotions: embarrassment, confusion, and perhaps, if I wasn't mistaken, a reluctant glimmer of newfound respect as we finished our dessert. The dynamics at our table had irrevocably shifted. My mother was uncharacteristically quiet. My father couldn't stop smiling and asking questions about the restaurant, and I felt a strange new power in simply being fully myself, without pretense or protection, in front of the people who had known me longest. The staff treated me with their usual respect, no longer hiding their deference, and I watched my mother observe these interactions with new eyes, perhaps finally seeing me as others did, not as her disappointing daughter, but as Chef Madison, tailor, restaurant owner, and respected culinary talent. It wasn't the fairy tale reconciliation one might hope for, but it was something more valuable: an honest reckoning with reality and the beginning of what might become a more authentic relationship. After we finished dessert, I offered to show my father around the kitchen. He accepted eagerly, while my mother opted to remain at the table, claiming she needed time to digest everything, both literally and figuratively, I suspected. As I led my father through the swinging doors into the heart of my domain, his eyes widened at the organized chaos of a professional kitchen in full service. Line cooks called out orders. Flames leapt from sauté pans, and every surface gleamed with the meticulous cleanliness I demanded. "This is incredible, Madison," he said, taking it all in. "All of this is yours?" "Yes," I replied, feeling a surge of pride as I watched him absorb the reality of what I'd built. From the menu development, to the staff training, to the business operations, everything. My father watched as I checked a sauce, offering guidance to a young cook who was still learning the station. He observed the respect in the cook's eyes, the confidence in my movements, the natural authority I carried in this space. "You remind me of your grandmother," he said softly. "She had the same instinctive touch with food, the same ability to lead without raising her voice." Coming from my father, this was perhaps the highest compliment possible. "I learned from the best," I replied. After the tour, my father asked if he could stay in the kitchen to watch me work. I set him up on a stool in the corner where he wouldn't be in the way, but could observe everything. For the next hour, he watched me expedite orders, plate dishes, and manage the kitchen with a quiet efficiency that clearly impressed him. When we finally returned to the dining room, my mother was sipping coffee and looking uncharacteristically contemplative. The restaurant had begun to empty as the evening wound down. I showed Dad the kitchen, I told her as we sat down. She nodded. I assumed as much. An awkward silence fell over the table. Finally, my mother spoke. The food was excellent, she said stiffly. You've obviously developed considerable skill. Coming from her, this qualified as effusive praise. Thank you, I replied simply. I don't understand why you kept this from us, she continued, a hint of hurt in her voice. Your own restaurant, a Michelin star. Why wouldn't you share such accomplishments with your parents? I took a deep breath. Would you have believed me if I had told you? Or would you have found some way to minimize it? To compare it unfavorably to Amanda's career? To suggest it wasn't quite good enough? My mother looked genuinely surprised. Of course I would have been proud. Really? Because for my entire life, you've made it clear that nothing I did measured up to your expectations. Why would this be any different? My father reached for my hand across the table. Madison has a point. Barbara, you've been hard on her. My mother bristled. I pushed her to excel. There's nothing wrong with having high standards for your children. There is a difference between having high standards and making someone feel like they can never meet them, I said quietly. Like they're fundamentally disappointing you by being themselves. My mother fell silent, seemingly absorbing this. After a moment, she straightened her napkin and said, well, I can see that I may have been overly critical at times, but look at what you've accomplished. Perhaps my pushing helped motivate you. It was such a classic Barbara move, attempting to take credit for my success while simultaneously acknowledging she might have been wrong, that I almost laughed. But I could also see that this was as close to an apology as she was capable of offering at this moment. I didn't succeed to prove you wrong, Mom, I said gently. I succeeded because I found something I love, and I worked incredibly hard at it. The fact that it also happens to be prestigious enough to impress you is just a coincidence. My father, ever the peacemaker, interjected. What matters is that we're here now, together, celebrating both my birthday and Madison's amazing achievement. This is a new beginning for all of us. As the night drew to a close, I walked my parents to the door. The staff lined up to say goodbye, treating them with the deference usually reserved for restaurant royalty, which, as the chef's parents, they now were in this small ecosystem. My father hugged me tightly. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more over the years, he whispered. I should have been stronger. It's okay, Dad, I assured him. You supported me in your own way. Those notes in my lunchbox meant more than you know. He pulled back, surprised. You remember those? I kept everyone. His eyes filled with tears again, and he embraced me once more before stepping outside to wait for the valet. My mother lingered in the doorway, clearly struggling with what to say. Finally, she asked, would you consider coming to dinner next Sunday? I'm hosting a small gathering. Amanda and Richard will be there, and some friends from the club. A pause. I'd like to introduce you properly as Chef Madison Taylor. It wasn't an apology or a profound reconciliation, but it was an olive branching acknowledgement of my identity on my own terms. I'll check my schedule, I replied. Sunday is usually my day to develop new recipes. Of course, she said quickly. You're very busy. I understand if you can't make it. I softened slightly. But I'll try to be there, she nodded, then did something unexpected. She reached out and squeezed my hand briefly. The German chocolate cake was perfect, just like your grandmother used to make. She would have been very proud. With that, she turned and joined my father outside. As I closed the door behind them, Sophie approached. Well, that was quite the evening. Are you okay? I considered the question seriously. I think I am. For the first time in a long time when it comes to my family, I actually am. Over the following weeks, things shifted gradually, meaningfully. My father began stopping by the restaurant regularly, sometimes just to sit at the bar and watch me work with undisguised pride. He brought friends to dinner, introducing me with beaming enthusiasm to anyone who would listen. My mother's adjustment was more complicated. She alternated between genuine interest in my work and awkward attempts to integrate my success into her established worldview. At her Sunday dinner, she introduced me as my daughter, the award-winning chef, with the same tone she once used for Amanda, the liar. It was progress, albeit imperfect. The most significant change was within me. For years, I had carried my mother's criticism as an internal voice, questioning my choices even as I succeeded. That voice began to fade, replaced by a stronger sense of self-validation. I had built something meaningful on my own terms. I had created not just a successful business, but a place where people found joy, where staff were treated with dignity, where creativity and excellence coexisted. No one could take that away, not even Barbara Taylor and her impossible standards. 6 months after the revelation dinner, I invited my parents to a special event at me of the launch of my cookbook, which had been years in the making. As I signed copies and chatted with guests, I spotted my mother in conversation with James Pearson, the food critic. Madison's grandmother was the real culinary genius in the family, she was saying. She recognized Madison's talent early. I was to focus on traditional paths to success: law, medicine, business. I didn't understand that cooking could be a legitimate art form. She paused. I was wrong about that. It wasn't a public apology or dramatic confession. It was something more sustainable, or quiet reckoning with reality, an adjustment of perspective based on undeniable evidence. Later that evening, as the event wound down, my father pulled me aside. Your mother bought 5 copies of your cookbook, he told me, grinning. One for her, one for each of her closest friends, one for Amanda, and one that she's keeping pristine on the coffee table. She shows it to everyone who visits. I laughed. Seriously. She's learning, he said, slowly, but she's learning. That night, after everyone had gone and I was alone in my restaurant, I walked through the quiet dining room, running my fingers along the tables, remembering the journey that had brought me here, the long hours, the burnt scars on my arms, the nights I'd slept on the office floor because there wasn't time to go home between services. I thought about my grandmother and how she would have loved to see what her Saturday cooking lessons had inspired. I thought about my younger self, so desperate for approval, and wished I could tell her that validation would eventually come, but that the most important approval would be her own. Success is often portrayed as a moment of triumph, a medal ceremony, a standing ovation, a viral victory. But real success, I've learned, is more often found in quiet moments of certainty, knowing who you are and what you've built, regardless of who sees it or applauds it. My mother's opinion of me had shaped so much of my life, yet in the end, her recognition wasn't the victory. The victory was no longer needing it quite so desperately. The victory was creating something authentic and excellent, whether she understood its value or not. As I turned out the lights in my restaurant, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for decades. The complicated relationship with my mother would never be simple, but it had evolved into something more honest. The silent support from my father had blossomed into open admiration, and most importantly, I had found my place in the world on my own terms. Have you ever had someone doubt your dreams only to be proven wrong? How did you handle that moment of vindication? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey of family tension and culinary triumph, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need to hear that success is the best response to doubt. Thank you for being part of my story. And remember, the most important critic to satisfy is yourself.